Before moving to Simi, my stargazing consisted mostly of moon watching and looking for shooting stars on warm summer nights. I had seen 2 or 3 lunar eclipses and had read how these occurred whenever the moon passed through the Earth's shadow, or umbra, as the encyclopedia explained. Aside from the moon, I could pick out the Big and Little Dippers and Scorpius, but not much more. I could name the planets, but I had never tried to find them in the night sky or to chart their paths through the constellations until I built a little telescope of my own. Building a homemade telescope was not my idea, but the brainchild of Mr. Raymond Horst, my 8th grade science teacher. Horst was an engaging and avuncular presence at Sinaloa Junior High School. In a time when most male teachers still wore suits to work, he often sported a rumpled sport coat or a cardigan sweater, but always a tie as well. In his brow-line glasses, he looked to me like a big owl, friendly and full of information. Horst's approach to teaching was far more hands-on than my previous science teacher. Unlike Mr. Ellis, Horst was not easily distracted, and instead of trying to entertain the class with stories, he was given to practical applications of the things he taught. This shift in focus to small class projects captured my interest. The first 2 months of Horst's class focused on a timeline of how life evolved on our planet. It was an intensive overview of prehistory, culminating in an individual class project. Each student was to create a shoebox diorama depicting a specific prehistoric era. The moment I heard the project described, I flashed on the idea of populating my diorama with origami dinosaurs. I'd been folding paper animals and flowers for years, but did little more with them than hang them from mobiles and tuck them into the letters I mailed to friends and relatives. Now, the idea of using origami figures for a science project captured my attention. I chose the Cretaceous period and folded paper models representing the Tyrannosaurus rex, the Brontosaurus, and the Stegosaurus. Horst was apparently impressed with my efforts. He gave me an A on my mid-semester report card and exhibited my shoebox diorama with several others in the display case outside his classroom, which delighted me. I was even more pleased the following week when Horst announced that astronomy would be our focus for the remainder of the semester. Being a self-taught backyard astronomer, I was eager for the opportunity to learn more. The idea that my familiarity with basic astronomical terms might give me an advantage over my classmates had never occurred to me. I came into Horst's class already knowing quite a bit about the solar system, and this served me well in the class. I didn't need Horst to tell me the order of the planets from the Sun, their relative sizes, or how many moons orbited the planet Neptune. As he lectured, I often realized that I already knew what he was telling us, so I didn't bother to write it down. A detail quickly noted by Ralph Cooley. "You didn't even take notes," Cooley said one day as Horst handed back our graded test papers. Cooley sat in the desk adjacent to mine and often asked me for help. "How did you pull an A on that test?" He was right. I knew most of the answers on the test, although a couple of the questions had given me trouble, in particular one that referred to a lunar eclipse. During the exam, I had raised my hand, and Horst walked over to my desk. "A question?" he whispered. "Number 14, I said in a quiet voice, pointing to the test page. "Are you asking the phase of the eclipse after the moon moves into the umbra or before?" I heard an audible gurgle from 2 or 3 classmates sitting nearby who began furiously marking their test papers. Horst smiled and shook his head. "Yes, that's right," he said quietly, "but don't say it again." He squinted at me and silently placed his index finger to his lips. At first I didn't catch what he meant. Then it hit me. Because the word umbra had been part of my speaking vocabulary for years, the idea that this might be a question on the test, or that some of my classmates might be struggling to recall the word, never occurred to me. The astronomy segment also brought another class project. Horst had spotted a do-it-yourself telescope kit in the mail order catalog from Edmund Scientific Company, and after collecting the modest cost from each of us, he ordered one for every member of the class. A few days before the kits arrived, Horst lectured about the invention of the telescope, often erroneously credited to Galileo Galilei, who constructed his only after reading descriptions by 3 lens makers in the Netherlands. Galileo's real contribution to astronomy was his discovery of the phases of Venus and the 4 largest moons of Jupiter, the Medicean stars, as he initially called them, in honor of the Medici family, then in power in Florence. These observations gave legitimacy to the controversial Copernican theory that the sun, not the Earth, was the center of the universe. When the telescope kits arrived, I opened mine to find an assortment of lenses, spacer rings, a short cylindrical block with an eye-hole drilled through the center, and 2 cardboard tubes, one of which fitted snugly inside the other. Under Horst's supervision, my classmates and I spent the next several class periods assembling our telescopes, following the package directions. At the end of the process, I glued a leathery sheet of black paper around the outer cardboard tube and fitted an aluminum collar onto the end opposite the eyepiece. "But it's all upside down," Cooley said as he swung his telescope toward the narrow classroom window and gazed through the eyepiece. "You probably put it together wrong," another classmate said. "No, it's supposed to be that way," Horst said. "A simple refracting telescope produces an inverted image. When you're looking at the stars, you won't even notice," he assured us. I could hardly wait to take my telescope home and try it out that night in my backyard. The mail order kit had also included a planisphere, and this rotating star chart did more to sharpen my interest in the night sky than did the telescope. I was no longer content to gaze passively, but over the next few months I began to identify constellations and to track the changing positions of the planets. That night, as I lay in the double bed of our guest room, I continued to inspect the night sky through the narrow gap in the curtains. Through the east-facing window, I could see the bright planet Jupiter rising over the eastern horizon. Quietly, I slipped out of bed and stepped to the window, telescope in hand. Bracing the end of the telescope against the window frame, I slowly slid the smaller tube toward me until the image of Jupiter came into focus in the eyepiece. There, clearly visible in a line extending upward from its bright disk, shone 3 of Galileo's Medicean stars.